The scores went up at 600, same as every intake cycle. 43 names on the board, ranked by the Citadel's evaluation system: strength output, reflex index, endurance rating, pain threshold response. The numbers did not lie. They never did. Raya Solano's name sat at the bottom, not close to the bottom, not a few slots below average. Dead last, separated from 42nd place by a gap wide enough to feel deliberate. The board highlighted her row in amber, the color the system used when a cadet's physical profile fell below the minimum threshold for unsupervised combat training. It meant she would need a supervisor present during live sparring. It meant she was considered a risk to herself. Most of the cadets read the board once and moved on. A few lingered on her row longer than necessary. Groth did not linger. He read the number, made a sound low in his throat, and walked away. That was all. He did not need to say anything. His inner circle understood the sound. They laughed quietly among themselves, the way cadets do when something confirms what they already believed. Raya stood near the back of the assembly hall and read the board from a distance. She looked at her score for about 3 seconds. Then she picked up her gear bag and went to find her bunk. The bunk was near the ventilation shaft on the east corridor, the one no one had chosen in 3 consecutive intake cycles because the shaft ran warm and made a low cycling hum every 4 hours through the night. She dropped her bag on the mattress, checked the storage locker, noted the hum, and decided it would not bother her. She had slept in worse places. She unpacked in 8 minutes and lay down with her eyes open, studying the ceiling. The Citadel was enormous. It orbited a mid-system waypoint between 2 Union member worlds, chosen specifically because it belonged to neither, neutral ground, which was supposed to make every species feel equally displaced. In practice, the species that had been members longest felt most at home. The newer additions adjusted, or they left. Humans had been admitted to the Union 14 months ago. Raya was the first human cadet in this cycle, possibly the first in this wing. She had not asked. Dinner in the mess hall was the first real test, not of strength, but of something quieter. 42 other cadets, most of whom had trained together before, or at least trained in systems that overlapped. She carried her tray to an open section of bench and sat. The cadets nearby shifted slightly. Not away exactly, just enough. A 4-armed cadet 2 seats down leaned over. He was Thulian, broad at the shoulder, with a wide, flat face and large amber eyes that blinked in sequence rather than together. He introduced himself as Pren. He said it the way someone says a name when they are genuinely hoping it will be remembered. She told him her name. He repeated it carefully, making sure he had the sounds right. He asked her, with the directness that Thulians were known for, whether humans felt embarrassed about low evaluation scores. He was not being cruel. The question was sincere. Thulian culture treated embarrassment as a physiological event, something that could be measured and treated, and he seemed genuinely curious whether she was experiencing it. She told him no. He considered that. Then he said that he found it interesting. Most cadets in the Amber Range requested a reevaluation within the first 2 days. He had seen it in previous cycles. She asked him how he knew that. He said he had read the Citadel's intake records before arriving. All of them. 4 years' worth. She looked at him with slightly more interest than before. She asked what the reevaluation results usually showed. He said they almost never changed the score by more than 2%. She nodded and went back to eating. Across the hall, Groth sat at the head of his table like it had been assigned to him, which it had not. He was Varkai, the species built like something that had decided evolutionarily that compromise was unnecessary. Scaled hide in dark gray-green, a secondary joint in each arm that gave his strikes a second acceleration point, and a combat record from his homeworld's military academy that the Citadel Intake Board had apparently spent considerable time reviewing. He was the obvious alpha candidate. Everyone in the hall knew it, including him. He was not watching Raya. He had already forgotten she existed. She noticed this. She filed it. After dinner, she went back to the practice wing and used one of the open sparring dummies for an hour, not to train a technique, to feel the equipment, resistance levels, response delay, how the floor panels absorbed impact, how the ceiling height would affect a jumping approach. Basic information. The kind of information that mattered later. A supervisor drone hovered near the entrance, logging her session per the Amber Protocol. She did not acknowledge it. When she returned to her bunk, the ventilation shaft had started its 4-hour cycle. The hum was exactly as low as she had expected. She pulled her blanket up, closed her eyes, and was asleep in less than 2 minutes. The board still showed her name in amber at the bottom of the list. She had not asked anyone to change it. The first sparring match ended in 40 seconds. Raya's opponent was a Dravani cadet named Solt, compact, fast, with 3-fingered hands that moved in short, precise strikes. He was ranked 31st. By the evaluation numbers, they were supposed to be close. They were not close. He put her on the floor twice inside the first exchange, and the third time he pressed a joint lock against her left shoulder until the match supervisor called it. She did not tap out. The supervisor called it because her shoulder angle had entered the injury threshold and she had not made any move to stop it. Solt stood back, uncertain what to do with that. Most cadets tapped. It was standard. Letting a joint go to the injury line was considered either very stubborn or very unintelligent, and he was not sure which this was. Raya sat up, rolled her shoulder, and asked him to run the third exchange again. He blinked. Match was over. There was no running it again. She said she meant in open drill, after hours. She wanted to feel the lock entry a second time. He stared at her for a moment. Then he said he would think about it, and left. The second match went similarly. Different opponent. A Thulian cadet, not Pren, but from the same species. Heavier, slower, but with a grip strength that registered well above her tolerance level. He caught her once around the midsection, and the medical scanner on the floor mat sent an alert ping. She broke the hold by dropping her weight entirely, which was not a technique in the Union standard curriculum. It worked. He lost his grip. She turned inside his reach and drove an elbow into the nerve cluster below his second left arm. He stepped back. The scanner pinged again. Her rib pressure reading was still flagged. She pressed forward anyway. The match supervisor physically stepped in at that point and stopped the round. He told her she had a possible hairline fracture in her lower left ribs and the match was suspended pending medical review. She said she was fine. He told her that her pain readings suggested otherwise and that the scanner did not care what she thought she felt. She went to the medical bay, let the scanner confirm what it found, accepted the gel wrap, and returned to the training floor before the session ended. She had been gone 19 minutes. The supervisor logged the return and said nothing. He had been working at the Citadel for 11 years. He had seen cadets push through pain before. This felt different, though he could not have said precisely why. Pren found her after the session, in the smaller auxiliary practice ring near the east corridor. She was running drills against a static dummy, but not the same drill on repeat. She would run one sequence, stop, adjust her foot position by a few centimeters, run it again, then change the angle of her lead shoulder, then the height of her guard. Small changes, systematic, like she was running through a list in her head. He watched for a while before she acknowledged him. He asked what she was doing. She said she was learning what did not work. He said that seemed like a slow way to improve. She said it was the only reliable way. If she only trained what worked, she was just getting better at conditions that already favored her. That was not useful preparation. She needed to know exactly where every approach failed, what the failure looked like, and how far into the failure she could go before the situation became unrecoverable. Pren was quiet for a moment. Then he asked whether she thought she could actually win matches here. He was not being unkind. He was asking because he genuinely did not know, and with Thulians, not knowing was worse than asking. She said yes. He asked against whom. She thought about it for a few seconds. Then she said most of them. He asked about Groth. She did not answer immediately. She ran the drill sequence one more time, adjusted, ran it again. Then she said she was not ready to answer that question yet. He accepted that. He sat on the edge of the practice ring and watched her work. After a while, he started noting when her footwork looked off and pointing it out, not because she asked him to, but because he could not help it. She listened to each note without stopping the drill. A few of them she incorporated immediately. The others she kept running without change, which he eventually understood meant she already knew and was testing something else. They trained together for 2 hours that way. He did not ask again about Groth. Above the auxiliary ring, through the long observation window that ran the length of the upper corridor, Drill Commander Orissa stood with her hands behind her back and watched the session in full. She was a Delvani, tall, gray-skinned, with eyes that did not reflect light the way most species' eyes did. She had been running intake cycles at the Citadel for a long time. She watched Raya adjust, test, discard, and adjust again. She did not pull up the girl's file. She did not need to. She already knew what the file said. The file was not what she was looking at. She stood at the window until the session ended. Then she walked back down the corridor toward her office without saying a word to anyone. The group tactical exercise was called the Corridor Run. 12 cadets split across 2 teams, one defending a marked route through the Citadel's lower simulation deck, one pushing through. 40-minute window. Points for objectives captured, contacts neutralized, team members still active at the end. Raya was placed on the push team. Standard assignment, random rotation. Nothing unusual. Except that 10 minutes in, when the push team split at Junction 4 to cover 2 approach paths, Raya's earpiece went silent. Not interference, not signal lag. Someone had manually switched her comm channel inside the team frequency, rerouted her to a dead band frequency that sent nothing and received nothing. She pressed the contact twice, heard silence, and understood what had happened in about 4 seconds. She looked at the junction. Her assigned path continued into a simulated hostile zone, 3 automated contact drones patrolling a corridor that her team was supposed to clear together. Without team support, the scenario was rated high difficulty for a solo cadet. For a cadet in the Amber range, it was rated effectively uncompletable. She completed it in 22 minutes. It was not clean. She took 2 drone contact hits that the simulation logged as significant injuries. She moved through the corridor slowly, using the wall geometry to limit the drone's angle of approach, forcing one-on-one engagements instead of grouped fire. She neutralized the drones in the order that reduced her total exposure time, not the order that would have been fastest. Fastest was not available to her. Safest was. When she reached the objective marker, she pressed it, and the system logged the capture. Her team had already finished the rest of the route. They were clustered at the end point when her name appeared on the mission board under completed objectives. Alone. No assist logged. One of Groth's cadets, a Varkai named Drev, broad-shouldered and completely unsurprised by his own bad decisions, looked at the board and said nothing. He had engineered the comm reroute. He had expected a failed objective, a note in her file, and a quiet confirmation of what the board already showed. He had not expected a solo completion. Nobody said anything to Raya about the comm failure in the debrief. She did not raise it either. She read the mission log carefully, confirmed that the reroute was technically logged as a system anomaly rather than deliberate interference, which meant it had been done carefully by someone who knew the simulation deck. And then she submitted her completed objective report and left. Groth reviewed the result from his bunk that evening. He pulled up the mission log without being asked, which was unusual for him. He read her movement sequence through the corridor. He ran it twice. The third time he was not looking at whether she had succeeded. He was looking at how she had thought through it. The sequencing, containment over speed, exposure minimization, patience. He did not recognize the tactical framework. It was not in the standard curriculum. It was not in the Union combat doctrine he had studied. It seemed to come from somewhere older, or quieter, or both. He closed the log and did not open it again. But he began to notice her, not in the way that was useful to her. He noticed her the way a large animal notices something in its territory that will not perform the expected behavior. She did not drop her eyes when he passed. She did not angle her body away from him in corridors. She did not do any of the small physical things that the social architecture of the Citadel expected from lower-ranked cadets in the presence of an alpha candidate. With every other species, these were instinctive signals. readable and reassuring. With her, there was simply nothing. She moved through the corridor. She noticed him. She kept moving. He interpreted this as ignorance of social protocol. She was new. Humans were new. She probably did not know the signals existed. Drev and the others interpreted it as insolence and said so. Groth told them to leave it. She was not worth the attention. But he kept watching. Pren warned Raya 3 days after the corridor exercise. He sat beside her at morning meal and told her, with the flat, careful delivery of someone passing on information they considered important, that Groth had been asking about her. Not loudly. Quietly. Which in Pren's experience was worse. Raya set down her utensil. She asked what specifically he had been asking. Pren said Groth had asked Drill Commander Orissa whether the human cadet had any prior combat record, any formal training background beyond the intake evaluation. She asked what Orissa had said. Pren said Orissa had told him that cadet records prior to intake were not available for review by fellow cadets, and that if he had tactical concerns about a team member, he should raise them through the proper report channel. Raya picked her utensil back up. Pren asked her if she was going to do anything differently now that Groth was paying attention. She thought about it for a moment. She said no. He said that seemed like a risk. She said everything here was a risk. The question was, which risks were useful? He was not entirely sure what that meant, but he had learned in the past 2 weeks that with Raya, clarity usually arrived later. He finished his meal. She finished hers. They went to training. Nothing changed in how she moved through the Citadel. Not a single thing. 3 weeks into the cycle, Groth called an assembly. He did not go through Drill Commander Orissa. He did not use the official request channel. He used the cadet broadcast system, a simple open address that any cadet could trigger, designed originally for emergency communications, used in practice for announcements that wanted an audience without an official record. Within 4 minutes of the broadcast tone, the main assembly hall was full. 42 cadets, plus 1. Raya came in near the back and stood with her arms loose at her sides. She had been in the middle of cleaning her gear when the tone went out. She had finished cleaning it before coming. There was no reason to rush. Groth stood at the front of the hall. He was not in combat gear. He was in standard uniform, which somehow made it more deliberate. He had not come to fight. He had come to speak, and he wanted that distinction clear. He talked for a while about the Citadel's intake standards, about how the Union's expansion policy had opened admission to species whose physiological profiles had not been properly assessed against the demands of real combat training. He said this calmly, without raising his voice, the way someone delivers an argument they have already won in their head. His inner circle stood at the perimeter of the hall and said nothing. They did not need to. Then he said her name. He said that Raya Solano represented the weakest combat profile the Citadel had processed in 4 recorded cycles. He listed the numbers: her strength output percentage against Union baseline, her reflex index, her match record in sparring rotations. He had pulled them from the board, which was public record, so there was nothing technically wrong with citing them. He said that her continued presence in the cycle created an administrative burden, a supervision requirement that diverted resources from cadets who could actually use the training. He said her scores made every human who came after her look like a poor investment. He said all of this without cruelty in his tone. That was the precise thing that made it land the way it did. He was not angry. He was stating facts. Calm, clear, documented facts. He was not bullying her. He was making a reasoned case for why she did not belong. The hall was very quiet. Raya had listened to the entire thing without moving. She was still near the back wall. Her expression had not changed. She had the look of someone reading a long document, attentive, tracking, not yet at the part they were waiting for. When Groth finished, she waited 3 full seconds. Then she raised her hand. The hall processed that for a moment. It was such a small gesture, almost casual. Groth looked at her. He gave a short nod. She could speak. She said in a clear and even voice that under Union Citadel Protocol, Article 14, any enrolled cadet in the current active cycle retained the right to issue a formal challenge to the designated alpha candidate to be conducted under standard match conditions, with Union observers present. She said she was issuing that challenge, now, on the record. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. The first silence had been the hall absorbing a dismissal. This silence was the hall absorbing something it had not prepared for. Groth did not move for a long moment. His jaw had closed with a very slight shift. Something behind his eyes recalculated. Then he said that she understood what a challenge meant. It was a full contact match under combat protocol, not supervised sparring with score limits. A real engagement, match conditions, called by an official. She said she understood. He asked whether she wanted time to reconsider. She said no. He said he would accept the challenge. He said it without expression, and that was a tell, because Groth did most things with some expression. When he accepted, there was nothing on his face at all, flat and shut. Whatever he felt in that moment, he did not want anyone in the room to read it. Drill Commander Orissa had not been in the assembly hall. She was 2 corridors away in her office when the broadcast tone had gone out. She had not gone to listen. She had instead pulled up the live feed from the hall's internal sensor log on her desk panel and watched the whole thing from there. When Raya issued the challenge, Orissa closed the feed. She opened a new file, the formal channel for submitting match scheduling requests to the Union Observer Office. She began filling in the fields: date, participants, match classification, request for full observer presence. She worked without hesitation, like someone completing a task they had been waiting to begin. Pren found Raya outside the assembly hall a few minutes after the cadets had filtered out. He looked like someone who had a large number of things to say and was not sure which one should go first. She looked at him and waited. He said, "You know he is going to try to end it in the first 10 seconds. She said yes. He asked if that was a problem. She thought about it for a moment. Genuinely thought about it, not performing consideration. Then she said, "Only for him." She picked up her gear bag from where she had set it against the wall and walked back toward the east corridor. Pren stood there a moment longer. Then he did something he had not done since arriving at the Citadel. He smiled. The match was scheduled for the 6th day after the challenge. 3 observers had confirmed, 2 from the Union Combat Standards Bureau and 1 from the Human Integration Liaison Office, who had rearranged her schedule to attend. Every cadet in the cycle was present. No one had been told to come. No one had stayed away. The arena floor was a regulation circle, 12 meters across, slightly raised platform, contact sensors embedded in the surface that tracked impact force and location. The sensors fed into the official match record. Everything that happened on that circle would be logged, time-stamped, and filed. Groth did not warm up. He walked from the preparation room to the circle with his arms easy at his sides, and he stood in his starting position like someone waiting for a door to open. He had ended every previous match before the 2-minute mark. He had never been forced into a third exchange sequence. His opening press was considered the most technically efficient entry in the current cycle. 2 accelerating strikes from the secondary arm joint, followed by a center mass push that used his weight advantage to end positioning before the opponent could recover. He had run it so many times that it had stopped feeling like a technique. It felt like inevitability. Raya walked out from the other side. She wore standard match gear. No modifications, no extra padding. She looked exactly as she had looked on day 1. Lean, unremarkable by the Citadel's visual register of strength. Several cadets near the front of the viewing area exchanged glances. The amber-flagged cadet, on the arena circle, against Groth. She stepped to her mark and stood still. The match official ran through the protocol. Standard conditions, live contact, called on incapacitation or voluntary submission. Union observers confirmed their recording equipment was active. The official asked both cadets if they were ready. Groth said yes. Raya said yes. The tone sounded. Groth moved immediately, which was the only way he knew how to start. The opening press exactly as every cadet in the room had seen it before. Left shoulder dropped, secondary arm coming up to generate the first strike, full body weight shifting forward behind it. Raya did not try to block it. She moved left, not back, not away. Left, inside the arc of the strike, which was the direction no one moved because moving inside the arc brought you closer to Groth, and closer to Groth was where the damage was. She turned her left shoulder in as she moved. The strike connected. It did connect. It was not a miss, but it landed on the upper outside edge of her shoulder rather than the center of her chest, which was what it had been aimed at. The impact force was real. The sensor logged it. She absorbed it and kept turning. What she did next was not in the Union combat curriculum. It was not in the Varkai fighting index. It was not in any of the cross-species tactical libraries that the Citadel's training system referenced. She used his forward momentum, all of it. She dropped her weight low, lower than his center of mass, lower than any opponent his own size could have managed, got both hands to the inside of his lead arm, and redirected. It was not a throw in the sense that she lifted him. She simply gave his momentum a new direction. He had been moving forward. Now he was moving forward and sideways and down, and his own body weight was completing the work she had started. Groth hit the arena floor. The impact was significant enough that the contact sensors in a half-meter radius spiked simultaneously. The structural dampeners in the platform absorbed most of it, but the sound traveled. A solid, total impact that the arena had not produced in the current cycle. His primary support arm made contact wrong. The sensors logged a joint compression event. He tried to rise. His arm did not respond correctly. The compression had hit the secondary elbow joint, the same joint that powered his opening strike. He pushed, got partway up, and his balance did not cooperate. The arm was not broken, but it was not available. Raya had stepped back. She was standing at a slight angle, watching him, completely still. She was not pressing forward. She was waiting. He tried again. Got one knee up. His arm sent a signal his brain had not expected to receive. He looked at her. She looked at him. The match clock, on the arena display above the circle, read 11 seconds. The match official stepped forward. He checked the sensor log on his handheld, looked at Groth's arm position, and called it. The arena was silent. Not the stunned silence of a crowd waiting for noise that had not arrived yet. This was genuine silence. 42 cadets who had processed what they had seen and were still working out what to do with it. The Union observers were not silent. 2 of them were already in active notation. The third, from the Human Integration Office, had stopped writing entirely and was simply watching Raya with an expression that held something that might have been recognition. Groth stayed on one knee for a moment. Then he stood, favoring the other arm. His face gave nothing. He looked at Raya. She met his eyes. She did not say anything. She did not raise her arm, did not gesture, did not perform the victory for the room. She simply stood on the circle and let the moment be what it was. The match official completed the official call. Winner, Raya Solano. Time, 11 seconds. The arena stayed quiet for another 3 full seconds after that. Then Pren, from somewhere in the middle of the viewing area, started to applaud. 4 arms. Very loud. Groth spent 4 hours in the medical bay. The joint compression in his secondary elbow was serious but not permanent. The attending medic told him the recovery window was 10 days and that he would return to full function. Groth listened to this without expression. He was not thinking about his arm. He was thinking about 11 seconds. He kept running the sequence, the opening press, exactly as he had always run it, and then the moment where something had gone wrong in a way he still could not entirely account for. She had moved inside the strike. No one moved inside the strike. His weight had been fully committed forward, which had always been the point, because his weight committed forward was a force that could not be redirected once it was in motion. Except it had been. He lay in the medical bay and stared at the ceiling and for the first time thought about the difference between never losing and never being beaten correctly. The formal proceedings were brief. Under Citadel protocol, the winner of a challenge match assumed the Alpha designation for the remainder of the cycle. The match official read the outcome into the official record. The Union observers confirmed their documentation, and the cycle board was updated. Raya's name moved from the bottom of the board to the top. The amber flag was automatically cleared by the system. Alpha-designated cadets did not carry supervision flags. No one had to make a manual change. The system did it on its own. without anyone asking. She attended the proceedings, accepted the designation in 2 words. She said, "Acknowledged," when the official asked if she understood her new status, and left. Pren walked with her afterward. He had a lot of energy and nowhere to put it. He asked her several questions in quick succession. How long she had planned that specific technique, whether she had rehearsed that exact sequence, whether she had known his arm joint was a vulnerability, or whether that had been incidental. She answered in order. She said she had identified the technique during the 2nd week. She had not rehearsed the exact sequence. You could not rehearse an exact sequence because the opponent's weight and commitment would always vary. She had known about the secondary arm joint because she had watched every match Groth had competed in since arriving at the Citadel, and the joint showed a consistent microflex during the opening press that indicated it was already under load before contact was made. Pren went quiet for a few steps. Then he said, "So when I asked you, in part 1, whether you thought you could beat him, back when you said you weren't ready to answer that question yet." She said she had known since week 2. He asked why she had waited until week 4. She said she needed him to be certain she could not. A fighter who is uncertain is cautious. A fighter who is certain does not adjust. She needed Groth completely certain, so that when the match happened, he would run the exact sequence without modification. She needed predictability. She had waited until she had it. Pren was quiet again. Then he said that was either very calm or very cold. She thought about it. She said probably both. 2 corridors over, Drill Commander Orissa sat at her desk and wrote her recommendation to the Union Intake Board. She wrote it carefully, without shorthand. She described the evaluation metrics the Citadel currently used, the strength output benchmarks, the reflex index, the endurance ratings. She described what those metrics measured and what they could not. They could not measure threat awareness. They could not measure adaptive sequencing under pressure. They could not measure the tactical patience required to wait 4 weeks to issue a challenge at exactly the right moment. She wrote that the current metrics had rated Raya Solano as the weakest cadet in recent cycles. She wrote that this rating was not wrong given what the metrics measured. She wrote that the metrics were therefore the problem. She wrote that a scoring system which could not see what Raya was had to be considered broken, because the only thing it had successfully measured about that cadet was that she did not fit the shape of the scale. She submitted the recommendation and closed the file. The Union observer from the Human Integration Office sent a separate report to her bureau that same evening. She had spent the afternoon reviewing the match footage in detail. In her report, she noted that the technique Raya had used was traceable to pre-Union human martial traditions, joint redirection methods developed across centuries by smaller, physically weaker combatants for use against opponents with greater size and strength. She noted that the technique required a specific combination of low center of mass control, precise entry timing, and the willingness to accept initial contact in order to gain positional advantage. She noted that by Union standard evaluation criteria, none of these qualities were measurable at intake. She filed a request for a formal review of human physiological assessment protocols. The request was placed under consideration. Back in the East Corridor, Raya sat on her bunk near the ventilation shaft. The shaft ran its 4-hour cycle, the same low hum it had made every night since she arrived. She had her gear laid out in front of her, cleaning it the same way she always did. Methodical, thorough. She had already moved past the day in the way she moved past everything. Logged it, filed it, continued. The board at the end of the corridor still had her name on it. At the top now, not the bottom. The amber light was gone. She had not asked anyone to change it. The system had done it on its own. She went back to cleaning her gear.